So, hello everyone. It's good to be here. I also hope you enjoyed the lunch. And when I was asked to have this presentation, I know that Peter actually asked his son Jonas first, but he said no. So then here I am. And as you know, second place is always first loser. As a background in track and field, you always try to win, right? So next time I hope I get asked first, right? So I will tell you with a story. I will start off with showing these two gentlemen. Do you know who they are? It's Thomas Edison, and then whispering in his ear is Henry Ford. And actually, in about 100 years ago, Thomas Edison was developing an electric car. But at the same time, his chief engineer at that time, Henry Ford, was also looking into building a car, but with a combustion engine. But the problem was that Henry Ford was so much better in scaling production. I mean, he started the assembly line thinking. And basically, from that time on, electric cars were out of the question, and then from that point, we have a combustion engine. And today we are struggling to get rid of those combustion engines. And these are the climate goals that we have in Boliden. And basically 75% of the CO2 emissions that we have within Boliden mines come from transport. If it's a large trucks in Aitik or if it's underground trucks in one of our mines. And the goals now is that we should reduce the scope 1 and 2 emissions with 42% until 2030. And also we should reach net zero by 2050. So, will we achieve that? If we look at from a perspective right now, we can see that our Minister of Environment, Romina Pourmokhtari, I can't pronounce it, sorry. No, but she, I mean, it's quite clear that Sweden will miss the climate goals as it looks right now. And also in 2024, SBTi, the organization that we are connected to, that we measure our climate targets, they actually removed 240 companies from their list because they didn't have enough targets, so they didn't have any clear targets now to achieve this. And Sweden, an early climate leader, we're retreating from its environmental commitments, and it's also been part of an EU trend. At the same time, we have the German Chancellor, Merz, said that he would try to push this ban on combustion engines further in the future. And we also have Volvo Cars. They're backing down from their goals, that they're not really ready to go electric. And then we had probably the most powerful leader in the world saying that if it goes higher, it goes lower, whatever the hell happens, the climate change, it's the greatest con job ever perpetrated. Of course, that affects the climate or the business climate for electric vehicles. And then we also have some supplier from us, sorry Sandvik, but they're saying that in 50 years' time, I cannot imagine a mining industry that is not electric. And I truly hope we can move much faster than that, right? So, and based on these policy changes that have been happening around the world now, we now see that peak oil has been pushed until 2050, according to the International Energy Agency. Used to be 2030, now it's 2050. So just the last 2 years, we have pushed peak oil by 20 years into the future. So what should we do within Boliden? So I think we need to come up with a medicine, how we can cure this climate change. So we actually have these climate change denial pills that we can take. And the best way to cure the climate change denials is actually with proving that it is better and cheaper and more productive to run the better electric machines. So if we can prove that we get the better TCO, the total cost of ownership, with electric trucks, it doesn't really matter whether you believe in the climate change or not. Then it will happen. So what we're doing right now in Boliden, we're trying a lot of different products. For example, we have this Volvo truck running in Kankberg as a service vehicle. We have had this Scania in collaboration with Renfors for 3 years. And the interesting part with that type of truck is that we actually had a new one now in Garpenberg, delivered just before Christmas. And comparing the specification on this one with the new one is twice the battery capacity and twice the charging speed. So in 3 years' time, technology have advanced that much. We also tried this Sandvik loader in Garpenberg, a better one. We also have this power agnostic truck running up in Aitik, hopefully battery converted sometime in end of this year, beginning of next one, a bit unclear still. And we also have the Wallin project, as many of you know of, where we have basically a full electric fleet. And then we have 2 trucks from Scania coming to Garpenberg later this year, hopefully in August sometime. 2 battery electric trucks that will basically run waste rock underground. But then we're also trying other suppliers that we haven't worked with before, like this XCMG truck that is a Chinese brand. And they're one of the largest manufacturers of construction equipment in the world. And of course, this is all good. I mean, there's a lot of good products. So what is actually the problem? Why don't we just buy battery trucks or battery machines? Because they don't really exist in large volume and to the specification that we need yet. If we take the ultra-class trucks in Aitik, if we look at the current suppliers that we have, they are aiming for maybe 2030, 2035 to have a really good battery setup on those trucks. And if we look at other cases as well, it's more of a, I mean, the battery trucks are still really expensive. So combining that, we can't really reach our TCO or the total cost of ownership yet. So we need to work really hard on that. And what's a bit problematic is that we talk a lot in the Western world that we need to do this, we need to do that, but China, they are not talking, they're walking, walk the talk. And they are not walking, they're running. They're going really, really fast. So for example, XCMG again, same trucks, not the same truck, but the same brand as we have in Aitik. They signed a deal with Fortescue to deliver 250 of these 240 tons truck. We have a fully autonomous fleet of 100 electric mining trucks developed at the Yimin mine. We have another Chinese brand, XEMC, so it's not the same. Also operating 220 tons battery electric trucks in a coal mine. Of course, you can argue why you run battery trucks in a coal mine, but that's still, it's on the way. We also see that, LKAB, they've been running together with Snells, some Sunny trucks, now in Sappavara. And again, our trucks that we have been running up in Aitik, and also Boliden and Kevitsa has purchased a couple of these loaders with battery electric loaders. And at the same time, we have the CEO of Scania saying that China is passing us on the truck side, and I think they might already have passed us actually, they're not about to. And just the other day, I think the CEO of Volvo, Martin Lundstedt, said that they are basically having lowered, their ambitions are lower, and they have not been able to sell as much battery electric trucks as they hoped for. And at the same time, so Volvo, roughly 2% of the sales right now is battery electric truck. But in China, in December, actually 54% of the newly registered trucks were battery electric. 54% of the fleet. So in total, 45,000 trucks, fully or partially electrified. But still, if we look at it, China is still the world's largest polluter. So that's also something to keep in mind. But even they are the largest polluter today, they are still the one investing most in the green transition, in renewable energy. So if we look here, they are still investing, the red part, that's oil, natural gas, and coal. So they're still investing almost $300 billion a year in coal. But they are also investing $600 billion US dollars a year in green energy. So they are making the transition, I think, really fast. And the bubble chart here on the right-hand side, that's actually active projects right now and how much gigawatt hours installed capacity they are building. And as you can see, China is probably outperforming the rest of the world by far. So why are they doing this? I mean, you could always say that renewables, we sometimes say that it's about energy independence. But for China, it actually is. I mean, look at the current situation now with Venezuela and Iran. China is buying a lot of oil from those countries. But if you look from an electrification perspective, they already have control of the complete value chain, basically. So around 80% of the critical materials for building green, from the green transition, 11 clean tech segments listed here. Roughly, on average, China has control of the manufacturing of 80% of that. So of course, you now consider from a Chinese perspective, they are actually getting energy independence from doing this. But what about us? Are we relying on a sole country to actually do our electrification here? And if we look at the battery manufacturing market share in 2025, China had 86% of that. So that's quite a lot. That was almost a monopoly. I mean, they can basically lower the price a little bit and outcompete any other manufacturers. And we were pushing hard in Europe. You know, we had Northvolt. But that was actually probably the last significant effort from the European battery manufacturers to actually build something that could possibly compete with China. And now we also see that the previous customers to Northvolt have switched to Cattel, so the Chinese brand. So let's have a reality check on the cost curve for batteries right now. So this is data from one of our OEMs. If we would like to buy a battery pack, just a battery pack, no truck, it costs us roughly 1,200 kilowatt hour per US dollar. But if we buy a Chinese wide body truck, like the ones we have in Aitik, XCMG, we pay roughly 600, including the truck. So it's half the price, and we get the truck for free. And now if you just look at the battery, then actually the Chinese ones are below 300 US dollar per kilowatt hour per day today. And it's the same on the charger side, actually. So we have this hard hitter charger, Chinese brand in Aitik, and basically it's 1,000 SEK per kilowatt in installed power. And then comparing to tenders that we have had or quotations that we have from Western suppliers, it's much, much more. And you can also argue that this 350 kilowatt, that's much less than this 1.2 megawatt. But it's not a function of the power here, it's more a function of volumes. So volume is everything here. And here is a picture I took last week when I were in China. So this is all the blue trucks here, they are battery electric. And this is from one factory in Changsha that Sany has. So they just built a completely new factory. They have a takt, you know, Peter, you always talk about takt, right? In the mining industry. They have a takt of 6 minutes. So every 6 minutes, a new truck, battery electric, rolls off the line. So just in this picture, I think it's, if you look carefully, you can see A171. So basically it's 200 trucks per side of the road. So this is around 400 battery electric trucks just here. And this new factory that they just built, it's basically fully automated. They have very few people. They can monitor every step. And of course, we like to say that it's a dirty work environment, and they are not really that good at manufacturing, but that was probably the most modern factory I've ever seen. They had a pond with fishes in the middle. So it was really, top notch, everything. So why are they able to move this fast? So one actually reason we usually blame subsidies, that's why they are so fast and that's why they can produce this much. But also we have a lot of regulations in the EU, for example. So this is a picture showing first of all, to the left-hand side is the e-commerce and consumer protection regulation. So you can look at from 2017, there were roughly 50 pages, 200 pages, no 50 pages in that document. Now it's up to 250 pages. Then you can also see the number of shells. That's the increase from maybe 200 to 1,000. So of course that's put a lot of pressure on the European suppliers and on us. And the same with the right-hand side here, the data privacy regulation. And basically, they don't regulate that much in China, for good and for bad, of course. But maybe we need to think about it. Do we regulate a bit too much? And I will come back to that. And also there's a openness when you're talking to the Chinese suppliers. So when we were there last week, they talked about 120-ton payload mining truck. They only had a slide in Chinese then, so we asked for it, if we can get it translated. And of course, beginning of this week, they sent it to us. So I sent an email back. So am I allowed to show this picture on the conference? Sure, no problem. So this is still a development project. And when we asked, so what is the timeline of this? It's far, far in the future. It's far in the future. Also, but when? Yeah, not until, maybe beginning or mid-2027. So, I mean, that's a bit of different perspective than when we talk to our Western suppliers. If something is far in the future, that's 2030 plus. Here, it's a year. And if you look at the specs on this one, it actually has a really big battery, 750 kilowatt hours for those who are into that. So this one can probably run in Aitik, for example, between 4 and 5 hours without needing to charge. So and another example is that they also can provide conversion kits for big trucks. So this is actually, we got the specification. So basically you get the builder materials, you get the wiring, you get everything. They just send it. We can do this, here are all the specs. Do you want us to come and retrofit the truck to a better electric one? But here again, the regulations are hindering us because then we probably need to CE market again. And we don't want to be the OEM for that truck, because that will become if we start to do it ourselves. So why don't they care about this? And there's a guy who had quotation, I don't care about patents. Patents are for the weak. But what it means basically is that if you're fast enough and innovate fast enough, it doesn't matter because patent is more of a blocking. If you're fast enough, then it doesn't really matter. So if you have a really fast innovation cycle, then you don't really need patents. So if we look at the experience that we have now been working with this Chinese supplier a little bit, I mean, they do take much bigger risks, but they also can get quite good rewards on it. And they are for sure much, much more agile. You always get an answer within 24 hours, usually much faster. When I sent a question if I could show this picture, I got an answer within 5 minutes. Yes, you can show it. And I don't think that would happen in many companies that we have as suppliers today. So they make decisions really fast and they are really transparent in what they do. So they move fast and they break stuff. But I don't think they're that good in managing old tech. I mean, they're really good right now because they have this window. They are switching to battery electric. They don't have that much of a legacy, as a lot of the Western companies have. So an anecdote. So with these chargers that we have in Aitik, we had a problem. There was one of the circuits or a switch that we wanted to change. We didn't see it met our specifications completely due to regulations. So we sent an email. And within 24 hours, we had a reply. Yes, go ahead, you can change this circuit. You will not violate the warranty. You can take this email as a confirmation. Imagine sending that type of email to any other supplier in the Western world and getting a reply, yeah, you're perfectly fine to change this in our equipment. So, we have built a system in Europe and the Western world that is not really sustainable. And so this is a this is a document from 1944 from OSS, Office of Strategic Services. So it's a predecessor for CIA. And they actually have a handbook in how to commit sabotage in the field, I mean, behind not enemy lines, but in peacetime, how do you infiltrate companies and make them move much slower? How do you make them slower, and how do you make them not succeed in their journeys? So they have this section called General Interference with Organizations and Production. And if you look at this, so first, insist on doing everything through channels. So follow all the processes all the time. Never permit shortcuts to be taken in order to expedite decisions. And the next one, refer all matters to committees for further study and consideration. Attempt to make the committees as large as possible, never less than 5. So, haggle about precise wordings of communication, minutes, and resolutions. Refer back to matters already decided upon at the last meeting and try to reopen them and question if that's the feasibility of that decision. So, and this one, advocate caution and be reasonable and urge your fellow conferees to be reasonable and avoid haste, which might result in embarrassment or difficulties later. So avoid risk at all cost. And be worried about the correctness of any decision. So raise the question of whether such action is contemplated and if it lies within the jurisdiction of the group, or whether it might conflict with the policy of some higher management level. Do you recognize yourself in your companies? But this is supposed to be interference with organizations and productions, so not the solution in how we should operate. So it's basically deeply rooted now in both the government and also in companies that we are so afraid of doing mistakes, so we've built this type of systems. So, I mean, we have a culture of compliance, which of course is good, but it's shaped by fear of making mistakes, so it leads us to decisions being constantly escalated up the hierarchy. So, risk is avoided at all cost, caution is promoted, not to achieve better outcome, but to avoid embarrassment later on. And of course, that's typical for all the government in Sweden today, I think. If you look at the public funding agency, Vinnova, they are so scared on doing something wrong, so they're basically not, they have a really hard time making any decision that could conflict with some rules or regulations. So we actually built a system that actively encourages exactly the same behavior as this Office of Strategic Services once taught the resistance fighters. So we have a war in Europe, and what's happening in Sweden? So the National Cybersecurity Center, that was delayed because the municipality of Solna didn't allow a fence to be built around it. We also have, it took 3 years for the Air Force to be allowed to fly on later after 3 o'clock on Fridays and also during weekends. 3 years. And also Bofors has been continuously in legal battles to increase the firing times and allowing more tests in their tracks. And then lastly, the Swedish Research and Defense Agency is not allowed to test drones. Maybe you will talk more about that later on. But you're not allowed to test swarm droning because you need an operator for each drone, according to the Swedish Transport Agency. So of course, this is quite a big blocker for a lot of things happening. I think the same is true for the mining industry. I mean, we have a really long processes before we get the permit to open a new mine, for example. So I think it's not just in government, it's also visible everywhere. So the difference, it's in the intention, of course. I mean, the resistance fighters, they acted deliberately to paralyze an enemy. But, I mean, the European model that we have now, we have, of course, no malicious intent in it, because all this is built upon that we should save taxpayers' money, we should comply with rules and regulation, we should ensure quality, safety, and so on. But if you combine all these sensible decisions, the sum of them is actually a system that undermines itself. So why is China winning then? So first of all, I think right now they're actually better and faster at innovation than we are in the Western world. They move really fast and make decisions fast. And also, if you look at the battery electric one, they actually control the complete value chain. They have for the last 15 years built up a process where they actually have agreements or have ownership of mines both in Africa and Chile. So they actually control the complete chain of raw material from lithium to a complete battery and also now to a complete truck. And of course you can get the cost down by doing that. So I think in a way, I mean, a company like Sunny started in 1989, I think, and now they're producing 300,000 battery electric trucks a year. That's quite a journey. So they're a bit like Tesla, I think, were from the beginning now. So, and also this lack of regulation or maybe respect for them is also, I think, a big thing here, is that while in Europe we regulate first and then we try to innovate around it, but maybe we need to go the other way around. We start with the innovation, then we can maybe regulate afterwards. So I mean, there is a saying that, I mean, that used to be that US innovates, China replicates, Europe regulates. But on top of that, in Sweden, we complicate, because we try to follow all the rules and regulations all the time. I think we're best in class in Europe in following all the regulations. Look at Italy. I don't think they're following more than like 70% of what they are mandated by the European Union, where I think we are up to like 99%. And we're already, I think, a year after we got members of the European Union. So of course, China is moving really fast, and I think we have but we also have what I think we have that China doesn't have, is the ability to collaborate between the companies and organizations that are partly sitting here today. I mean, if we look at the picture and the products that we are testing in Boliden right now, I think we have a really close collaboration with Volvo, with Scania, Piroc, Sandvik, and all these big suppliers. And I think that's quite unique so that's more of a Swedish model of innovation. So I think that's where we actually can beat them. By being better at collaborating, we can probably do something about this. So lastly, there's a book called Volt Rush, The Winners and Losers in the Race to Going Green. So I recommend you read it. It's on Storytel at least, probably available somewhere else as well. So thanks for your attention.